just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. The coffee pot is on, and Friday Java is on the air on the 17th of August 2018, beaming from WBRN radio via the internet and on the Boston Red network at bostonred.org. We can find us on Facebook at Boston Red, it's 2 words there, on Twitter at Boston Red. We're on YouTube. You can find us at the iHeart Media app. There's over 800 broadcast stations there. On Stitcher and on YouTube and various other outlets in between. Speaker, Blog Talk, they're still limping along, as one would say, although they have merged together. And we still hope to do the talk show. Didn't do it this week. Traveling this week, unfortunately. Thus, it didn't get done. We do have Numbers Man coming up this weekend. That is from the Numbers Man Network. This weekend, economics. Our macroeconomics program. We have some interesting things there in terms of where petroleum is, where the economy is in general. An open source report. Hopefully we'll get that done now that we're on holiday from college, and we'll be returning after Labor Day. Anyway, nonetheless, let's move on with this. We'll start with the people from the University of Virginia at Charlottesville. That's Larry Sabato's shop, and of course we always remember Heber Heyer here that was murdered by a white supremacist and various other people associated with the alt-right. This is an interesting, the governor's ratings. This is where the crystal ball is. We'll talk about where our Ouija board is in the state of Georgia. That is the seat that now is occupied by Governor Deal. But however, our own Stacey Abrams is running there in Georgia, and they have the rating. This is Crystal Ball's rating, likely Republican. Now they have it lean Republican. In the state of Maryland, it's an interesting situation there. They had it at lean Republican now, leans Republican. Now it's likely Republican. That's Larry Hogan. It's interesting in a Democratic state that Larry Hogan could hold on. Now, our own Ben Jealous is running there for governor. Supposedly, according to this, his internal polls put him almost 10 points behind, 9 points behind there in Maryland. In the state of Maine, LePage from leans Democrat to a toss-up. And in the state of Minnesota, they have a leans Democrat there from a toss-up. And Kate Brown out in Oregon, from likely Democrat to lean Democrat. Kate Brown's always had relatively low numbers. We'll talk about that in a minute. And in the state of Wisconsin, Boss Walker, they had it at lean as a Republican. Now they have it at a toss-up in the state of Wisconsin. DJ Trump's ratings are very, very low in the state of Wisconsin. Now with 40 to 50 states have held primaries so far, including major primaries in Minnesota and also in Wisconsin. We thought this is a good time to take stock and to reassess the gubernatorial landscape. Democrats remain poised to net several governorships, but the size of those gains remain unclear. Well, yes, in some instances. Let's start with Wisconsin, where Democrats selected the public school instructor there, Tommy Evans. A Democrat they nominated on Tuesday night. Evans was probably the most credible candidate. Not so sure about that. Our friend out of Milwaukee there, Mr. Mitchell, in our opinion, was the most credible and the most progressive head of the professional firefighters of Wisconsin, and an African American. But nonetheless, Walker is on the other side of the situation. Walker is now trying to cast himself as the education governor after destroying education in the state of Wisconsin, the Badger State. Not only that, Boss Walker there destroyed the Public Workers Union, and he was poised to turn Wisconsin into a right-to-work state. Didn't happen there. He had bounced back to recall in 2010 and in 2014. His recall was in 2012. We are waiting to move this race to toss-up until the primary, but it's clear for a while that Walker is in a tough spot. No doubt about that. Little Paulie Ryan has disappeared from the landscape. He's not running for re-election. They call it retirement. Primary voters chose Baron Stilf, a University of Wisconsin regent and former Ryan aide, backed by the Speaker. And the Democrat is Randy Bryce. He's an iron worker who became a national fundraising sensation when he was running against Ryan. Two things work in Stelp's favor. Brian has some liabilities, such as what the Associated Press summed up in a history of legal and financial troubles. And more importantly, Wisconsin 1 is considered right of center. That's down around Janesville. There, Trump carried it by 10 points, and a Republican-backed state Supreme Court candidate carried it a few months ago in the statewide race that the Democrats-backed candidates won statewide by double digits. So we moved Wisconsin 1 from a toss-up to lean Republican there. And I don't know. We'll check this Associated Press story out and come back to it. In Minnesota, excuse me, we covered Minnesota. Tim Waltz and this Jeff Johnson character, right-wing evangelical that ran against Mark Dayton in 2014 and lost. To us, this is about the best outcome for the Democrats. Waltz defeated
Lori Swanson, who is the Attorney General of Minnesota, who entered the race later and struggled with a recent story, no doubt about that. And also Ms. Efren Murphy, who, according to this, and this is a lot of bias here, was more left of center, no doubt about that. But meanwhile, Johnson handily defeated Tim Hu Pawlenty, who once ran for president, who the National Republicans recruited into the race. We're moving the open race to a lean Democrat. It's an interesting race in itself there in Minnesota, and there's also the Attorney General's race, which Keith Ellison, a Muslim and an African American that had been a Congress type from Minnesota, now decided to run for Attorney General. And we'll get to that in a minute. A domestic abuse allegation against him. And it's one of those situations that the whole case hinges on a video. Does the video exist? If the video does exist, it would show Ellison dragging a girlfriend off of a bed, supposedly. And we'll hear a little bit from the girlfriend. And doing a special on that, we actually found an interview that she had with a gentleman talking about domestic violence, excuse me, narcissism, the whole thing around politicians. It was very well done, very well laid out. She's a very articulate woman. But in this instance, we have a case that has to be settled quickly. In other words, the Minnesota Democratic Party is investigating it, and the National Democratic Party is investigating it. And we'll get to the article in a minute from the Minneapolis paper. The Northeast, it's dismal there. We have old Charlie Baker in the Commonwealth there still holding on. The Democrats really didn't feel an opponent. They put somebody in there just to have somebody. Chris Sununu, he's in New Hampshire. And some character named Phil Scott in Vermont. And that's unfortunate. That is Bernie Sanders' state, and we'll see. Largest support of, new gun registers, but still holds fine in November against a former Vermont Electrical Cooperative CEO. Oh, this is Christine Hawkins, who is a transgender person running there in the state of Vermont. The fourth New England governorship held is in Maine. That's where old crazy LePage was. We previously viewed Maine as lean Democrat pickup owing to national environment. However, the race has developed in such a way we're not sure the Democrats are favored anymore. Iowa, the state's Attorney General Janet Mills, the Democrat, or business person Sean Moody, a Republican, will be the next governor. But there are two other candidates in the race who could potentially hurt Mills more than Moody in a state where, governors are often elected without a majority. Well, when you have that type of contest, it's a very interesting situation there. We'll have more on Maine later. That's incidentally a state that in the primaries Barack Obama carried. I remember that happening in 2008. Back to the governors, a toss-up category in Connecticut, where business type, and this is Neil Lamont. Remember him. Will face another business type, Bob Sheffinsky. After the Tuesday primary, Connecticut's Democrat, but they put Republicans in. A different type of Republicans. That Republican doesn't exist anymore. Democrats that hope that the national factors, especially empathy towards DJ Trump, trickles down to the ballot in New England. That could happen. We'll get to that in the minute there. Omarosa and her tell-all book that's published by Simon & Schuster, and the attorneys, various types of attorneys, for DJ Trump, trying to suppress the book, but it's already out. She's going on a tour. And the difference in this book is she has several sources that have it recorded. In other words, it's not a situation where she would say a source, whereas some of the women that appeared that had been Playboy models, etc., porno type, or adult entertainers, let's put it that way. They more or less had a one-issue thing that they were just associated with DJ Trump and proved the association. But Omarosa, the different situation in that she not only has recordings of one of Trump's lackeys offering her $15,000 a month to, quote-unquote, be positive words, to not shut up, but she has recordings of Kelly, the chief of staff, and numerous other recordings that are trickling out every few days. And these things will, in effect, have a detrimental effect on DJ Trump in a little different manner than, because it's a lot of the people that are around him that have been recorded here saying things, etc. And those things deteriorate. But what is back to the Democratic wave? Well, a blue wave to happen would not only get a deterioration of DJ Trump by, say, maybe 2 or 3 percentage points in his approval rating. We look at Gallup very closely there because they have a Cadillac, or whatever you want to call it, of the polling. They used to do it once a week. And also, we look at the economy. The economy is kind of our seesaw model. The economy is sort of up, down. Now, pricing of petrol is down because of an oversupply. So that means probably gasoline will not go up in the near future. We don't know. The impact of sanctions on Iran, very difficult to say now because they will go in too late to probably factor in this election. But you have other things going on also. The tariffs, will there be some type of settlement between the U.S. and China in time for the election? Very difficult to say in these types of situations where you have tariffs. But what we do know now from actual factual information is that many companies and many products have already either moved out of some markets or they have increased their prices. Now this will affect the U.S. economy because the increase in prices ratchets up inflation, and that has been the big enemy of the business community, at least in their perspective. From our perspective, the U.S. economy, particularly when coming out of the Depression, could have stood to have ran 3%, 3.5 inflation. But remember, these tax cuts and all these other Trump programs, in the best of times, are going to garner inflation. So when you see a Walmart or whatever doing well, but their prices for the most part have increased, most of these places have, you're getting some inflation within the economy, and that affects the overall economy. And we're also looking at the number of redundancies for some of these smaller plants, steel plants, etc., not the large ones, but the smaller ones because of rolled steel, etc. In other words, that has already happened. No matter what the Chinese and U.S. do at this stage of the game, it would not take place immediately. And the other sort of wild card here is Turkey. There, the Trump people are talking about putting more sanctions on Turkey because of some evangelical nut that is in stir in Turkey. But that also adds to problems, particularly in Italy and some of the EU countries that are more closely tied to Turkey since it is in NATO. So those are some of the things that could have a potential, and I say could have a potential to bring about more of a Democratic wave. But what has basically happened is commodity prices can be manipulated up, down, at least until the election, and the economy sort of up, down. You have lower unemployment than normal. but at the same time, pretty stagnant wedges. But even if you do get more equitable picture as far as raising wedges, etc., it would be inflationary, and that is more of a long-term problem. Anyway, back to the political broadcast here. Larry Hogan, from the Crystal Ball again, has a sky-high approval ratings in right around, what was it, 50 or 60%? Let me make sure we get this right. Here, looks like 50%. 50%, yeah, it's not exactly sky-high. 60% would be more sky-high. But anyway, that in itself is interesting. Ben Jealous, they're talking about some recent polling here, and this is had 52 to 38 internal poll. This is, we mentioned earlier, 49 to 40. Ben Jealous has a lot of work to do in Maryland, but there has been cases in the history of Maryland. What happened to another Republican governor, Bob Eric, in 2006 against Martin O'Malley, and so things started to move in the wrong direction. So they're moving this from leans Republican to a likely Republican, seeing the odds as improving in Maryland. Ben Jealous has a long ways to go. Of course, this is August, but we go into September and October to make that up. He's going to have very, very high turnout in the Baltimore and the D.C. Suburbs to counter some of the other things that are happening there. Now, this is out of the Chicago Tribune. This is Randy Iron Bryce wins the Democratic primary in Wisconsin. Now, there he's in the district, I think District 1 that Paul Ryan had in it. Now, this Bruce Stenley, I think it's pronounced Stenley, an attorney who is from a prominent family in Ryan's hometown. In a 5-way race, Stenley will face Bryce in the general election. Bryce called Steele a Ryan clone, no doubt about that, who defeated Janesville teacher and school board member Kathy Meyer in the Democratic primary. Steinold predicted voters will seek stark contrast in their policies. He and Bruce want to pump more cash, said Bruce wants to pump more cash into D.C. and work for a government takeover of health care. Well, that is erroneous. No doubt Bruce entered the race months before Ryan announced his retirement. Field hopes the Democrats, they can take that's the Southeast seat. Lead Republican, thick mustached Bryce rushed into the race with a slick campaign video a year ago. Raised $6 million. That's amazing. High-profile endorsement from Bernie Sanders, who campaigned for him, and Doris, a labor activist, Doris Hureta. I always mispronounce her name, but anyway, she's an associate of Cesar Chavez. But Republicans said the hype surrounding Bryce is just that, and his personal background, including history of legal and financial troubles, had plagued him and fueled attacks from Meyer. She argued that Bryce's past, which includes a failure to pay child support, a 20-year-old drunken driving arrest makes him unreliable on electoral. Well, 20 years ago, drunken driving offense doesn't say very much at all. In the 3rd district, that's incumbent Glenn Moore there, beat Gary George, a former state senator who was a convicted felon. Oh boy! and ran on successful again. Some more, Grace Moore, in 2014 and 10. The Republican side, a delivery man, oh boy, beat Cindy Virner, an Army veteran, and this is Tim Rogers, who moved to Milwaukee 18 months ago, boy, from Texas. This is just District 5. This is a suburban district, Republican, Stinson-Brenner, the second longest serving the House. He elected in 1978, defeated a pediatrician, Jennifer Vispound, in the primary, in his first primary in a decade. Sensenberger will face Democrat Pelowitz in the general election. In District 7, that's Northern Wisconsin, Democrat Margaret Ingebrigtsen, an attorney, beat Brian Eric, a doctor, for a chance to take on a Republican. Oh, this is Sean Duffy. That's an interesting situation there. Let me just move on here. The revoked security clearance. This is William H. McRibbon. He's a retired Navy admiral. Was commander of the U.S. Joint Operations Command from 2011 to 2014. He oversaw the 2011 Navy SEAL raid in Pakistan that killed Osama bin Laden. Former CIA Director Brennan, whose security clearance was revoked on Wednesday, is one of the finest public servants I've ever known. Few Americans have done more to protect this country than John. He's a man of unparalleled integrity, whose honesty and character have never been in question except by those who don't know him. Therefore, I would consider it an honor if you revoke my security clearance as well, so I can add my name to a list of men and women who've spoken out against your presidency. Like most Americans, I hope that when you became president, you would rise to the occasion and become a leader of this great nation needed. Good leaders tend to embody the best qualities of his or her organization. A good leader sets example for others to follow. A good leader always puts welfare of others beyond him or herself. Your leadership, however, has shown little of these qualities. Through your actions, you have embarrassed us in the eyes of our children, humiliated us on the world stage, and worst of all, divided us as a nation. If you think for a moment that your McCarthy-era tactics will suppress the voices of criticism, you're sadly mistaken. The criticism will continue until you become the leader we pray you would be. Well, forget that one. But this is an interesting situation. Will this sort of thing actually settle in? If it does, the 2 points we talked about would become a reality on DJ Trump. Let me just get this in here. The Epic Pen, that is an emergency treatment for various kinds of, allergies. That was the pen also. It went up, 500%. And it's they talk about a typical family of Jim Davis, whose 8-year-old daughter, Margie, suffers from a peanut allergy. Was startled to learn that his Walgreens pharmacy did not have a single Epic Pen available and wouldn't have them in the stock until well after school begins. Davis, a school teacher in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Widespread shortage of these Epic Pens, EpiPen, anywhere across the country, sent children with serious allergies to school without medication. Prevents them from going in anaphylactic shock if they are exposed, and that's bees and various other things there. They usually keep some at home. Many stash their own, but a program that provides free Mylan brand EpiPens, the schools is facing a backlog. These pens are actually manufactured for Mylan by Pfizer. Parents are worried and angry again with Mylan, whose pricing was raised to 500% over a decade to more than $600 for 2 packs, sparked nationwide fury and a congressional investigation. The manufacturer, Pfizer, anyway, despite the limited availability of EpiPens, other companies are starting to ship the medication. Amneal Pharmaceuticals said its pen are available through manufacturers sending intermittently supplies early this year. Another manufacturer here also is in stock. Calino, I suppose is who they are. We're working very closely with manufacturers to monitor the supply since beginning of the school year. That's from the Food and Drug Administration there. Friesen Blumman. Anyway. In emergency, EpiPens are injecting the thigh to stop severe reactions triggered by allergies, bee stings. Are some of the things that they help do. And let's see, Pfizer said times there's no evidence that the patient's death related. Oh, I see. That was the another company, actually subsidiary of Pfizer, called Meridian Medical Technologies, that actually manufactures these EpiPens. Anyway, and they had some deaths. Quality control evidently involved in this. The FDA has also approved the first generic version of the EpiPen, telling the approval as part of its efforts to protect against drug shortages. Generic one, which would be sold by Teva Pharmaceuticals USA, could be substituted at the pharmacy for the EpiPen without a separate prescriptions there. So there is something coming out here. We thought we would put this in. And Omarosa Newman, a publisher of the former Omarosa explosive new book, on Wednesday issued a defiant rebuttal to what it described as hollow legal threats from a Trump campaign attorney. Gist of it: we will not be silenced. Mr. Trump is the president of the United States with bullets pulpit at his disposal. Simon & Schuster's outside counsel Elizabeth McNamara said in a letter, a copy of which obtained by the Post, to the extent that he disputes any statement in the book. He has a large platform in the world to challenge it. Nonetheless, McNamara added, we will not be intimidated by hollow legal threats. The counsel for the campaign is Charles Harder, said on Monday in a letter to Simon & Schuster's executive, threatening the book publisher would be subjected to liability for substantial monetary and punitive damages. Won't work there. The Unhinged, which hit the bookstores on Tuesday, and we'll have a review of it. Tell-all paints Trump as a bigot and questions his mental health, as also details an allegation of $15,000 a month for a job in the Trump campaign. Manigault Newman is in an effort to buy her silence. Manigault Newman has kicked off her media tour, and excerpts of the book, of course, have been published. We've started to digest the book ourselves. We'll have more on it later. And Hardin filed an arbitration arbitration action filed by the Trump campaign. This is back to these non-disclosure agreements. Let me just sum this up. Adam Rothberg of Simon & Schuster, Senior Vice President for Corporate Communications, confirmed in a statement Tuesday that plans for the book publication will continue unchanged, despite various legal claims and threats made by representatives of the Trump campaign. Gallery Books and Simon & Schuster are proceeding as planned with the publication of Unhinged by Omarosa. Confirmed that we're acting well within our rights and responsibilities as a publisher. This gets very, very dicey here. Said that the book was primarily aimed at educating readers about the leader of the country. Unhinged Let's see, Hardy added he did not identify any particular excerpts as false. The Trump campaign does not have a viable legal claim merely because unspecified true statements in the book may embarrass the president or his associates. And this is where you never know where something like this is going. And if they go into a lawsuit, then that is a totally different situation. Let me just check on our time here. And we'll get to a little bit of, we got some time. A little bit of what's happening to Keith Ellison. This is from the Minneapolis paper. The headline here is Keith Ellison faces mounting pressure over domestic violence claim. Top DFL officials continue to back Ellison. Bid for the Attorney General of Minnesota faces mounting pressure. Not sure about the mounting pressure. The National Organization of Women asked him to drop out, but I'm not sure who else is. Basically, they said from the DFL chairs, Ken Martin, we support him, said at a news conference on Thursday, called to show party unity, but Martin added that there are questions out there that need to be answered. No doubt about that. They need to be answered sooner than later, period. Ellison on his way to gathering supporters home, on a Thursday evening in some place called Woodbury, said that he was trying to talk to voters and assure them that he didn't do what was alleged. I'm telling them I'm innocent of these charges. It's untrue. I'm telling them that I am working hard to help people understand that. Well, the problem with these kinds of claims, they tend to overshadow, and evidently this claim rests on a videotape, and as we said in our introductory remarks, this videotape is going to have to see the light of day. Absolutely. If the videotape is what she says it is, Mr. Ellison will, as they say, exit stage right. If it is not, then his campaign will go on. Now, obviously, there will be some damage, because when you have that sort of situation, there are people that believe the allegations that are first out there, and then we have problems. Anyway, nonetheless, Monahan said she met Ellison the night before he filed for the Attorney General's office, and he wanted to know if she was planning to talk publicly about their relationship. Ellison's campaign provided what appears to be texts between them. We've looked at those. She requested the meeting herself. Now, somewhere here, here's an interview with her and a little bit of Ellison. This is from the organization CBS News. About 3 minutes, just listen to it.
A former girlfriend, but Karen Monahan says Ellison, who is running for Minnesota, abused her 2 years ago. She also claims to have video of the alleged incident. She recently discussed it with CBS News correspondent Jerika Duncan.
44-year-old Karen Monahan says in September of 2016, she and her then-boyfriend, Minnesota Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison, got into a heated argument that scared her.
I was still in bed, and I was laying across the bed on my stomach. I was listening to my podcast, and he walked in. He said, "I need you to take the trash out." And I kept, because I was on my stomach, I heard him, and I just went like that and shook my head. And he looked at me, goes, "Hey, you hear me?" And then he looked at me, he goes, "Bitch, get the out of my house." And he started trying to drag me off the bed. That's when I put my camera on to video him.
Did you call anybody after that?
I called a friend, and I said, "I'm at the lowest of the low."
Monahan says she saved the video on her computer. This past Saturday, Monahan's 25-year-old son, Austin, posted a message on Facebook saying that in the middle of 2017, he found the video, almost 2 minutes long, showing Keith Ellison dragging his mother off a bed and telling her to get out of his house.
I'm mortified, absolutely stunned that that she would say this.
Ellison spoke to our CBS station WCCO in Minneapolis about the allegations.
Did you ever drag her off a bed by her feet?
No, absolutely not.
She has said and insists that there is a video of this. Is there a video?
There couldn't be. There couldn't be such a thing as that.
And why couldn't there be?
Because I never did that.
Why speak out now?
I followed my gut, the gut that I kept trying to push down.
Monahan says she never reported the incident to police and says being dragged off the bed was the only time Ellison got physical with her during their 3-year relationship.
For people who might look at this and go, she said it only happened one time, and he did apologize right after.
He didn't apologize for putting his hands on me. One is enough.
Monahan says she has the video, but it's too traumatic, so she has chosen not to share it with anyone. She says she should not have to release the video in order to be believed. Elaine, she says her word should be enough, but again, Ellison vehemently denies her allegations.
Jerika Duncan, thank you. On this week's episode of The Takeout.
Well, this is an interesting situation, but the investigations are going to have to view that video. Now, I don't know if the video will ever be released to the public, what type of value that would have at the public seeing it. But however, statements by investigators, there'd probably be some attorneys that have reviewed this and saying that it does exist, perhaps would suffice. But this is a very, very dicey situation. It's one of these situations when you get in a political environment and make an allegation and back it up as proof by a video, you're probably going to be forced to release the video. And if she refuses to release the video, then these allegations are not going to be able to fully investigate them, because that is the only verification that we have at this time. And also, I'd been working on a broadcast of this, but in other items, evidently, of Ellison's interview with the local TV station, CBS affiliate, I suppose, he talked about she called him up once and needed some money for gas, and the money was, sent to her, however the situation was, and she ran out of gas someplace. So, as what happens in many of these relationships, and more like in her, she's an organizer for the Sierra Club, not probably paid very much, and she was living in Ellison's house, which is a precarious situation also, particularly if there's the alleged narcissistic personality was involved. So she moved out of there and had to find an apartment, had to borrow money, obviously, to get the apartment, and those kind of machinations that's going through. So you have a sort of a situation here that, and she talked about this, and in our program you'll hear her actually talk about these power relationships and relationships with politicians in general, and Ellison's talking about perhaps running for the Senate, I assume in Minnesota. Could have been a very good candidate for that, but Tina Smith had it. These party machinations there. Ellison is in his early 50s now, so he does have time. But if this explodes in his face, well, he'll go back to practicing criminal law again, I suppose. Anyway, stay tuned for this. We'll have more on it, and we're not obviously trying to take advantage of Ellison here, nor Ms. Monahan, in this an unfortunate situation, how it was done. In the other race in Minnesota for governor, Lord Swanson, Attorney General, been very effective Attorney General, but when the allegations came out that the office was used for political purposes, that hurt her. And also she'd gotten in a race a little late. She got about 120,000 votes. The winner, Waltz, was over 200,000 votes. And the candidate that we saw as the best candidate, Eflin Murphy, was at 150,000. And I saw in a letter from her but she's continuing on, which is good. It's hopefully form a grassroots organization, be very valuable to the state of Minnesota. Let me do the baseball scores here, and this is from Thursday night, actually. The Rays were at the Yankees, and the Rays actually beat the Yankees 3-1. The Mets were in Philadelphia. This is almost an impossible score, 24-4. The Mets had 25 hits, no errors, and the Phillies 10 hits and 4 errors. Boy. The Cubs and Pirates in Pittsburgh. Mr. Lester one-run game. He won the game, and Pedro Stope was got saved for the Cubbies. Cubbies had 7 hits and no errors, and the Pirates 6 hits, no errors. Very close game there. The Nationals and Cardinals in St. Louis. Nationals 5-4. Nationals had 10 hits, 1 error, and the Cards 6 hits and 3 errors. You usually win a game by doing that. The Rockies in Atlanta. The Rockies 5-3 in that all-important race out west. The Mets and Phillies. I guess this was the second game. Phillies 9-6. Phillies had 14 hits and 1 error, and the Mets had 9 hits and 1 error. Let me just check something here just a minute. Okay, there were 2 games, so it was a doubleheader. Mets won one and a blowout, and the Phillies won the other game in normal fashion. The Angels and Rangers in Texas. The heat of Texas, no doubt. 8-6 was the score of Rangers. The Tigers and Twins in Minnesota. The Twins 15-8 in that contest. They had 8 hits, no errors, and the Tigers had 10 hits and 3 errors. The Twins have basically sold the whole team off. The Blue Jays and the Royals in Kansas City. 6-2 was the score. The Royals over Toronto. The Diamondbacks and Padres down in the San Diego. D-backs 5-1. The Padres in the last in the West, as old D-backs in. I assume the Dodgers must have been off, unfortunately for them. Anyway, this will do it for us. We'll see you on the week that was. That's on Saturday morning. And then we'll return the numbers man part of the franchise on the Monday morning quarterback. And in between, the numbers man part of our BostonRed.org franchise will air this weekend. And hopefully the open source, that's our technical report, on open source hardware, software, deal with security there also. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Saturday night, actually.